Michael Jackson, who can sing and is a good-looking guy, but ain't the most masculine fellow in the world.
Look at this skinny. You like a healthy crackhead. Big ass lips. I bet you can whisper in your own ears.
Okay. Boy, you look like you say, hello, my Nubian queen, every day on the street. And you look like you get ignored when you do.
Y'all give it up for Steph Curry. Steph. Looking like a 10-year-old out there and shit. He be just playing this shit. Just throw the ball up.
I'm just gonna say your taste in Gorillaz needs work because Dare is not their best album.
People might walk up to you occasionally and they might want to just take a picture with you and say, congratulations, great work. With me, they want to debate. My life is harder.
Well, Steven, here's what I want you to realize. A, you're lying. Nobody comes up to you.
This you right here? This you!
It's me.
Yo, broke ass, bum ass, ugly ass. This all clean though, man. I can't even hate, man. This all clean, bro. What year this is?
This is 10.
Boy, it's about 7 years old, but hey, you still doing something, man. Your broke ass can't get everything.
What's your little old anime hoodie? Looking weeb hentai ass. Looking like you got a body pillow for every day of the week.
I do got a body pillow for it.
Which isn't even a roast because they're pretty expensive.
They are pretty. That just mean a nigga got money for his for his interest. Yeah.
Roasting, joning, a packing session, whatever your zip code calls it. All of these terms remind many of us of a simpler time. A full July sun, a bedroom full of the homies sipping half and half on a Friday afternoon. Soon an offhand comment about someone's hairline becomes a dog whistle to a 2-hour spectacle of jokes and obscure cultural references. Somehow his hairline looks like a treasure map to naps, an exhausted barber, and the equation y equals mx plus b, all at the same time and all leaving the room short of breath.
Are you familiar with the term playing the dozens?
Yeah.
I am familiar with the term.
Vaguely, yeah.
I actually am.
No, you definitely.
A group of cousins at a barbecue, cookout type of situation in a circle with one another.
It would basically just be like us sitting like in a circle. And it would be two people in the middle.
Insulting each other. Lovingly.
It would go to like your clothes or like your sneakers.
It tends to be like the older generations to like the younger generations or each other, I would say.
I hate describing it this way, but it's kind of like some like weird anime thing, right? Like if somebody hears that you're like really powerful, you're really funny, like they're like, oh shit, I gotta take him down. Let me go down there and talk to him at the lunch table and throw all my jokes at him. And then you start beating them things back.
Not you was on the hero journey. Not you was on the tournament arc.
Listen, I had it.
Level.
I had the world in the palm of my hands.
Black banter is perhaps the most ubiquitous aspect of Black culture, to me. You can try to take our clothes, our dances, even our language, but you can't grab our humor. Not with them ashy hands. The thing about being roasted is that no cap, it's an art. We don't say, I don't like your shoes. We say, boy, but your mama copped them 2 stripes Adidas for you. Is that the newest drop? Please give me hip that I miss them. There's a certain magic in the way that we joke. Every slight and hand chop, a quick and carefully made potion of subject matter, simile, and inside jokes. The way that humor is intertwined in the Black community is pervasive yet structurally delicate. We use it not only to acknowledge and maintain friendships, but also to express dominance and seniority over each other. It's very hard to exist in a space if you can't take a critique and throw a better one back. If you don't learn how to bomb, you'll be at the epicenter of every catastrophe. This is not to discourage being vocal, but to remind children that it is so easy to be silent and colored in this world, so that if we want to thrive, that simply isn't an option. I mean, I think so anyway. Like, there's gotta be a reason we put ourselves through shit like this. That's Tayo. This is Color Mind, a place where I talk about things that I thought about, so maybe you can think about them too. And today I want to talk about how Black people roast each other, various theories as to why Black people be like that, And ultimately, what I really want to find out is roasting just normalized bullying, or am I just not over middle school yet? I already know I'm getting cooked in the comments. For a long time, social scientists had two major schools of thought about the functions of the dozens: the mother rejection theory and the frustration aggression theory, which is what we're going to start with. So John Dullard was this American psychologist and social scientist known for his studies on race relations in America and the frustration aggression hypothesis that he proposed with Neil E. Miller and others. He was a white dude. He's often a white dude. Dullard describes the dozens as primarily a folkloric practice of expression aggression, meaning that niggas cook niggas because we're all hangry. Looking at the plight of black people, he determined that we were so disenfranchised in this country due to the small issues of housing discrimination, wealth inequality, medical racism, regular racism, diet racism, new and improved racism, digital blackface, police violence, domestic violence, leaky pipelines, actually leaky pipes, Tyler Perry, and the continuing existence of Nick Cannon. Okay, those last two weren't in the papers, but we gotta get on that. Jesus.
A lot of poverty, a lot of stress. We don't have, a lot of these kinds of infrastructures. And I think when you live in that, how people go about life and being, is to crack jokes, to not take things too seriously.
To Dullard, since attempts by African Americans to eradicate the oppressive societal practices placed upon them by their oppressors were generally frustrated, African Americans by necessity became aggressive internally. They lash out like themselves, sort of like crabs in a barrel.
I think like it has a mixture of, the parable, if you don't laugh, you'll cry type of thing. Like, so, and I've tried to figure this out with Caribbean culture, but I think it extends to especially the Black diaspora too, where we've had to find ways to cope with just immense subjugation and oppression, that we've become extremely adept at jokes because we've had to. Otherwise, we've become very adept at storytelling, at vernacular and being creative, because you have to get creative in being subjugated. So the reason why I think it's essential to the Black culture, especially, is otherwise we would have not have survived.
But even to me, that sounds sus, right? I mean, why would Black Americans roast themselves instead of literally firing upon their oppressors? Well, Dullard speculates that's because aggressive behavior is punished less severely by whiteness when it occurs just amongst the Negroes.
When a white slave master called you the N-word, that was to harm you, and then you stole it as a Black person and you call your friend the N-word. I think of that like an extension with everything else. We reclaimed the degradation and the tools used to abuse us, and maybe we abuse each other with it, but also we use it as a means of endearment, just like how you use the word you use the N-word as a way to endear yourself to another Black person. You use these tools of abuse that the slave masters would use against you to endear yourself to another Black person.
Dollard's arguments are tenable from an outside view. I mean, he was of the Colgate Constitution. Because almost any aggression committed by the underprivileged group in society that underprivileges them can be seen as a sort of substitute aggression for the force that makes their suffering possible to begin with. But looking at the problem more generically, the psychosocial problem of a healthy ego exists before any societal prejudice afflicts itself upon the individual. I don't think it's that hard to believe that the need to roast a sibling came before the white man did. Roger D. Abrams was one of the first folklorists to study the language and performance styles of Black Americans as reflected in songs, proverbs, and riddles. Professor Abrams cast his net wide, exploring Anglo-American folk tales, jump rope rhymes, and counting rhymes, but devoted most of his scholarly energies to the African diaspora in the Caribbean and the United States. He also had a fuck your mom complex. Maybe it'll make sense in a little bit, I think. While early folklorists had focused on Black religious expression, the language of the church and pulpit, Abrams focused on the understudied and vibrant verbal world, an exuberant, profane, and endlessly invented landscape. He explained the fine points of the dozens, as he said, to show how much insight can be attained into the life of a group through analysis of its folklore. Abrams agrees with Dullard that, white people make niggas hate themselves, but feels that the answer is too easy. So Abram theorizes that one, the black male youth family is dominated by females, the principal member of whom is the mother, but all the female members, sisters, aunties, cousins, reject the male youth due to his forever outsider status. And the male youth rejects them and returns and seeks membership in, get this, a gang. In order to develop a masculine identity and oppose the feminine values of his family and of large society. This change in culture requires, two, a violent and wildly permissive atmosphere for the expression of of the emotions appropriate to these new set of values, new edgy values like sarcasm and dick jokes. You know, moms would never understand.
Boy, you built like a ghetto Victoria's Secret model, skinny head ass boy.
Boy, bring your ass here, boy. Hold up. Boy, if you don't get your short arm hard to get my food out the drive-thru licking ass.
Hold on. Boy, you look like the first person I ever learned how to draw. You stick figure body having ass, boy.
Boy, if you don't get your small teeth, I can only eat soft food licking ass. Hold up. I only can eat potato salad licking ass. Hold up. I can only eat banana licking ass.
And so three, the dozens evolve to satisfy this need for a permissive atmosphere because obviously four, since the boy desires but cannot, at least at first, attack and exorcise his own mom openly, he attacks another person's mother so that that person may retaliate and thus do the job of attacking his mother for him.
Your mama's so nasty. How nasty is she? She's like a hockey player, only showers after 3 periods. You come back here.
Your mama's so nasty.
How nasty is she?
She's like a NASCAR driver. She burns 50 rubbers a day.
So not exactly a fuck your mom complex, but more like a fuck up your mom complex. I don't know if I have to explain why I don't like this theory all that much. I mean, we could start with how it uses females, but... So both of these theories have some holes. What else we got?
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad.
Well, both of the theories we just talked about presume the idea that playful insults, at least in the way that we've been discussing, originated from the conditions black people found themselves in due to family life or the general fuckery of the palm folk. But let me ask you a question. Why are we assuming that the dozens is an African-American invention and not some sort of diasporic holdover? Why do you think like cooking or roasting, this playing the dozens feature is so central or like such a tenet of like black diasporic culture?
Yeah. As I understand it, it can be traced back to like African traditions. So I think it makes sense that in a lot of different diasporic cultures, you'll find something akin to roasting.
Among the Igbos in Nigeria, a game strikingly similar, almost damn near identical, to the dozens is played by children, adolescents, and teenagers. It's usually played at night, after supper, under moonlight, and around other adults and relatives. The game is called Ikocha Ninkocha and means making disparaging remarks. Games like Ikocha Ninkocha are found not only among the Igbo of Nigeria, but also in other African societies, including Ghana, not to mention the Bahamas and other Caribbean cultures.
We call it ribbing. I think you also call it ribbing. Some people call it redding.
Getting red. You was getting all red up. But not red like how they now say in like America, like, oh, read them, like not red, like R-E-A-D. R-E-D, like getting red up. Like he was getting all red up.
I think raps is more like a general term you can use to describe conflicts. Honestly, to describe, I think, playful conflict as well.
Would you say that getting red is a like a big or a central like cultural tenet of behavioral culture?
Yes, Bahamians is a general. I would say about Bahamian people is Bahamian people like jokes. Like I mean that in a serious way. Like I think the first thing I think of Bahamians and it's cracking jokes. Bahamians crack jokes all day about every situation. The prime minister in parliament, anything could happen. Hurricane, cracking jokes. So yes, absolutely.
Why do you think that is?
Well, one, we like foolishness as a people. We really like comedy. We really like mess. I think for like Black people in general, I think it's to laugh to keep from crying, that kind of mentality. And I think that just kind of translates when you think about what it is to be in a very, a nation where there's a lot. And the Bahamas does well especially by virtue of most Caribbean countries. Like our dollars equal, blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't mean we don't still have major class differences. It's still one of the most expensive places to live in the world. With our cost of living is astronomical, but our minimum wage is like $5.25.
I think it really goes back to our roots, right? When you look at one of our most prominent cultural exports, which is soca music, right? Among others, of course. And soca is really just short for soul of calypso. So you go back to calypso, and a particular genre of calypso being extemporaneous calypso or extempo. And then pull on that thread and you go a bit further and you look into the roots of it being kaiso. And then you go further than kaiso, you just get back to those West African roots. The reason it's called kaiso is because of the chant that was used, right, in that custom. Kaiso, kaiso, kaiso. It meant like go forward, go ahead, more, keep going. And that keep going ended up becoming, that kaiso ended up being the label we used. Originally, that kaiso chant was used in the context of limbo, which is an invention of the enslaved Igbo people in Trinidad. I don't think people know that. But that chant ended up being the term that we used for that style of collective and entertaining and creative interpersonal expression.
In fact, and this is my favorite fact from doing this research, in 13th century, what would become Mali, the Mandinka considered emotional and verbal flexibility a social good and thought that a joking relationship or a sanankunya between close ones should be tolerated in their culture.
In fact, there was even an African empire further north that seemingly legitimized the dozens and made it law. The Mali Empire had a constitution known as the Korokan-Foga. The Korokan-Foga was instituted after the Battle of Karina in the 13th century, which founded the state of Mali. In it, the Mandinka said the following: "It has been established among the Mandinkas, the Sanankunya joking relationship. Consequently, any contention that occurs among these groups should not get out of hand, respect for one another being the rule. Between brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law, between grandparents and grandchildren, tolerance should be the principle." A modern interpretation of the Mandinka Sanankunya would most closely fit what we would call the dozens.
The main aim here seemed to be the promotion of tolerance and solidarity between citizens. Now, as a man raised in a fully Nigerian home, I can tell you something we don't have in small quantities is pride. And I wonder if this theory kind of accounts for why that could be a good social control. A social control for a culture that also encourages you to empower yourself, to know yourself enough to fight for it.
Part of it is that Black people and people of the diaspora, respectively, like really value verbal dexterity, like the idea that we would be able to respond to things quickly, on one hand as a survival skill, because it do be given like you have to be thinking like with your head and also with like the very surreal reality that we live in as Black people. There's like a simultaneous double think that we're constantly doing where we recognize the very ridiculous, like almost surrealist nature of like being a Black person in a room full of white people, and like that being a very like acceptable, ridiculous like situation that you know about, and at the same time having to navigate that space as a Black person, knowing that it's ridiculous, but knowing that it's real. I think that like dichotomy is something that we're practicing when we're like, your head look like with our friends.
Okay, so this is my theory. I don't like have a name for it yet, so I'm calling it like verbal sparring theory. But in the outside read white world, the default is always attempting to drown out our voices, right? As a Black person existing in a white space, there are constant calculations that we are required to take into consideration. We are constantly monitoring our volume, our interjections, our nonverbals, all in an attempt to disarm the people that we're talking to avoid being pigeonholed as the wrong type of Black. And that sucks, right? But the best part is that in spite of that, we succeed with ease and also with grace. And it's because we've been flexing this same mental muscle since we were barely in middle school. Growing up with a childhood of quick-tempered banter prepares us for an adulthood of code switching. Much like the rest of the mammals in the animal kingdom, flaming a friend is a lot like a mode of play fighting, in my opinion. It may seem aggressive to outsiders, but in actuality, it's done to practice the skills that are necessary to survive in the real world. Dictionary.com defines code switching as the use of one dialect, register, accent, or language variety over another depending on the social or cultural context to project a specific identity. And according to NPR, people code switch for many reasons, not just to fit in, but to actively ingratiate themselves to others.
No, Black people, we do have a lot of traditions based in like using language creatively. So I think that's one outgrowth of that. So I think it is a way to like flex your wit, to stay mentally sharp. But I also think it is a way for people to prepare others for like how they might be viewed outside of Black spaces, to kind of get you to develop a hard exterior, and maybe prepare you to adhere to certain standards of respectability so that you're not suffering certain social consequences down the line for things that the Black people around you are roasting you for right now. And to be more pessimistic about it, maybe when roasting veers into just like mean-spiritedness, I think there is a relationship between its prevalence in the Black community and, you know, living under white supremacy and other oppressive forces.
It does provide some kind of mental fortitude or like toughness, which some people could interpret as like kind of sad that we are preemptively preparing ourselves from very young ages to like be able to throw a verbal punch, because it is inevitable that we're gonna have to be quick with our mouth for to somebody who don't know no better, you know? I think that practicing that verbal dexterity prepares us for like shit that we're gonna have to deal with, that we shouldn't have to, but that we're going to have to, in really succinct, maybe sometimes funny ways.
As a Black person, if you want to progress in this world, you have to have an agile mind and a flexible tongue. So it logically stands that as an evolutionary tool, we would invent ways to keep our minds sharp and nimble amongst ourselves. And I mean like culturally evolutionary, not like, I'm not for eugenics. All right, don't let shit. So it logically stands that as an evolutionary tool, we would invent ways to keep our minds sharp and nimble amongst ourselves. I mean, what else is a good roast session if not a masterclass in mental agility, audience awareness, the ability to craft a strong story in the most engaging way possible? A practice that would not only teach how to properly assert oneself, but also give us the thick skin needed when we receive an inevitable pushback. And this is all important because this skill set is frequently looked down upon by those who continue to colonize us. The art of our conversations are nuanced and dripping with our culture, only to be stereotyped as our community being too loud, mean-spirited, rowdy Negroes. In times like this, it's imperative that we remember that the way we banter with each other is not only valid and cultured, but it is our biggest weapon in surviving a white world that wants us muted. And so, I think that settles it. Roasting may do a little harm, but it's all done with love, and it prepares for a world where we might get pulled down. Nice short video. Tayo, B, oh my God, why is the music still getting louder?
And now sports.
Shout out reckon that niggas is realized. The bag and trickle down, now I'm calling my comma bound. Boy got some clout, don't you start tripping now. Boy got some clout, don't you start tripping now. I'm from the part of the county where nigga named Iron will iron you out of town. I felt like Mark on my ass that I packed for myself and decided to double down. Shout out Big Feet for the real talk. Shout out Lil Vet, really put me on. Shout out Lil Bill, he a boss dog. Good taste, cornbread, garson. Yeah. On the best. On my chest, yeah. Y'all niggas test me and got 2 degrees, that's stupid shit. Zone watercolor, mind about them hills. 10K, 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 10K.
Talk about middle school. Talk about middle school.
It was fine.
Was it?
It did good.
For who?
I survived.
How much of you?
Thank you, Kevin.
Do you think roasting is harmless? And if it's not, when does it become harmful?
No, it ain't harmless. I'll tell you that for a fact. That shit ain't harmless. It is not harmless at all, especially because, like, when you roasting niggas and you young, like, we don't get. I mean, we was talking about this before, but like, you don't get instructed on boundaries. Like, the way that you learn to enforce your boundaries is to fight a nigga.
Basically.
You know? And so I absolutely think it could be harmful, especially, you know, like, I mean, shit, this was back in the 90s. Like, you just getting homophobic jokes thrown at you, you know, off rip. And if you're someone like me, all that's telling you is like, keep that shit quiet, nigga. Like, you can't, you know. So for sure, 100%, that shit is harmful. Especially, you know, when it comes to, you know, if you make you, I know for a fact that I have, and I'm willing to bet that everybody in this room has too, seen a black woman get roasted over some shit about her appearance. Which for black women, like, you know, you gotta leave most of that shit alone.
Once I had a brave fallout in school, and one of the boys, I told, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. They said it was a blizzard, because there was a little dandruff in the hair. They were like, "Oh, it's a blizzard," and every boy in the vicinity started putting their coats on.
No.
That was really bad. Yeah, and I had to just laugh about that one. But now I don't got dandruff. Look at that.
I don't know.
It can be both. It really can be both. Like, I think if everybody's in on it and everybody understands each other's boundaries and everybody understands the relationship they have with each other, like, it can just be all in good fun. But, like, you know, when somebody crosses a boundary, or like, if, like you said, reading a room, if you hop in there and you on 10 and you like, man, I'm on you, and then like nobody's like off it, at that point it's like you're just bringing this like this like toxicity to this area with all of these people that just genuinely don't want to do that right now. And that's fine. You don't have to want to do it all the time or ever if that's just not your thing. I think it's when you're forcing it upon someone, or you're like ignoring the boundary that they clearly set up. It's like that's when I feel like it becomes harmful. Now I feel like there's few people that can hear me say that, right? And like hear that and still think that, like, oh, that's soft shit. You always got to be on go. I don't think that's true. Sometimes you just had a bad day. Sometimes you just don't want to hear the shit. And I think that's incredibly valid.
Like, you have to be a certain kind of like friend, or we have to have a certain kind of intimacy with each other in order for us to be able to insult each other without it being like taken to heart, if that makes sense.
I've tried writing this a couple times, tried recording it a couple more. I'm not sure how to talk about this in public. Okay, so growing up, I was a middle-class first-gen American living in a lower middle-class suburb across the street from the city. I had bad vision, a worse taste for sweets, but my self-esteem put them both to bed. I wasn't loud, but somehow I always stuck out in the crowd. Something about my voice and how I bring a sort of depressed try-hard vibe to the function that only teachers really like. Maybe it was the funny name, or the Oreo accent, or winning the genetic lottery by being prone to sweaty foreheads, smelly lunches, and chronic shortness. So what I'm saying is I had a lot of ammo to work with in the worst possible way. Not to go all origin story on y'all, but spoilers, I was bullied. Wah, fuck you, so were you. Maybe not quite like me, maybe not plotting to turn bleach into beverage or cheating on death with the lips of a razor, but if you're watching this, you were probably bullied at some point by some people for reasons that scare you to this day. I guess except for maybe the 1% of reformed bullies that stumbled upon here trying to atone for their sins, in which case, mea culpa, but actually, nah, fuck you, you can die. Your character arc gave me trauma, Thomas. Fats, Pillsbury Doughboy, Burnt Butter Biscuit, Coming to America were things I answered to way more than my real name, if anyone bothered to pronounce it correctly at all. It was the locker room fights because somebody was bored, the paralyzing fear of going to the lunchroom because you gotta walk past that one table that always got heat for your shoes, your new polo, your old polo, your glasses, your dimples, the smell of your mom's plantain. I remember holding my dad's pistol, charred, black, and limp like me, thinking what my options were. I'm already ignoring it, but how much can you ignore it until it makes too much sense to fight back? Also, I ain't no bitch. I ain't not gonna go out like that. But I can't get into another fight. Mom will beat my ass. And the principal said there's nothing she can do. She have to expel me after the second suspension. Can't ignore it. You can't opt out. That obviously would only make it worse. And even if you act like you don't care, because you don't actually care what they're saying, the optics are just terrible. Prison rules, you know? You're letting everyone know who they can fuck with whenever they want.
Ben, why you let that boy put his hands on you? Ben, why you let that boy put his hands on you?
I just told you, Dave. I literally just told you.
Cause now I think everybody can put their hands on you.
No, he fucking snuck me.
Oh, for real? Free licks. Free licks on Ben. Everybody go up in room and hit him since he let everybody hit him.
He ain't gonna do nothing.
He obviously not gonna do nothing.
And like I said, I ain't no bitch. At a certain point, it's not even about optics anymore. It's like you've been designated the local punching bag. That's your role in society. So people watch you get punched and they pull away. Better him than me, right? Sure, you can respond back, maybe even be clever, but if no one backs you up, you just look dumb as fuck against 5 other niggas. So what am I supposed to do? What does everyone want from me? I know we could talk about the isolation, the constant anxiety, the mind fuck it was to feel like nothing about your body or your essence was valuable to the people around you. I know we can talk about that and we both would get where I'm coming from. But you know what really fucked me up back then? Maybe sometimes fucks me up now? Not the fear that my friends didn't like me. It was the fear that my friends didn't know if they liked me or not. That they were constantly negotiating on any given day whether or not I belonged in the group, whether I was an outsider or in. It taught me that friendship was supposed to be conditional, that I was on a constant audition to be interesting enough to the people I loved so they wouldn't get bored and ignore me, or worse, turn around and treat me the way everyone else did, the way I was supposed to be treated. I mean, I should be happy enough that at least someone wants to talk to me, that any conversation was centered around me, even if I was the butt. At the time, playing the dozens felt anything but a game, felt like failing at life, felt like never seeing friendship as a true option for me, eventually felt like frigid numbness, because eventually you do stop trying. I stopped responding and I let the bullets drip like oil. And surely that builds thick skin too. A chip on the shoulder even. Once I went to college, several miles away from my own town, it got better. I made friends who didn't know me and didn't have the baggage of my former bitch-ass self to discount me before discussion. And it turns out in a new pawn, I was all right. I was popular even. I was the face of the campus, a person everyone wanted a chance to speak to or invite to a party. I was funny, smart, and something I heard a lot in my first year was able to take a joke. Thanks. I've been practicing. So yeah, the way I grew up inevitably and ultimately taught me to stand up for myself, but only through thoroughly beating me down in the process. I'm regarded by some experts as a socially well-adjusted adult because of the hell I was able to persist as a child. Am I cool with that? I don't know if I'm cool with that. I really don't. On one hand, I love roasting. I love getting in a nigga ass, telling my best friend that he looked ashy enough to get Whitney right. With my current perspective, I do see its usefulness and I willingly participate in it more than I did when I was younger, for sure.
Ass look like a used bong seller. Ass look like Will I Am. Ass built like Booker T. Ass look homeless. Ass look like Lil John. Ass look like his beard incomplete. Ass look like Waka Flocka's slow cousin. Ass dread got bugs in it. Ass a budget T-Pain. Ass about to cry.
But on the other hand, there's a bigger reason for this video. I wanted to make this video for my 15-year-old self. What would he want me to say? How would he want to be comforted? I know for a fact if I heard a nigga talk about it gets better or you just gotta grit your teeth and be the bigger person, I kicked that motherfucker in his.
Like, people jones about their clothes and their different types of shoes and stuff like that. So if you don't have your good shoes, they'll say something about like, they'll be like, oh, your shoes, or they'll start talking about you. Or if your hair is not right, they'll talk about you. Like, you can't really be yourself because like if you're gay or like you don't dress like everybody or don't wear Jordans and stuff, you can end up getting beat up and stuff or John Don. And people be starting to commit suicide off that. That's why some people are killing themselves because of bullying.
And I know we don't like to talk about this. I know it's all jokes, all love, all in good fun. But this happens. Death happens. And it happens because sometimes it's not jokes. Even if the love is somewhere deep underneath that. If you're in the process of discovering your sexuality, your fashion sense, your sense of self in general, you can and will open yourself up to bullying from others. And when bullying becomes too much, that leads to, which just becomes another mean by which Black youth directly or indirectly experience death and loss. At present, suicide is the third leading cause of death for Black males ages 15 to 24 years old and has been for the past 20 years. You see, hegemonic performance requires men to be strong, to be able to effectively manage their emotions, and to be without fear at all times. Thus, a man's willingness to seek help or express vulnerability is oftentimes too socially costly, and in turn, men withhold their emotions in order to maintain a sense of control within, and also respectabilities among their peers. A lot of this can be explained by the precarious man theory. In diverse cultures around the world, people view manhood relative to womanhood as an elusive and tenuous social status that must be earned and defended repeatedly through public action. Now remember that manhood is distinct from masculinity, whereas masculinity refers to a set of traits that are culturally associated with men. Manhood is a social status. As the kids say, it's a mood, a vibe. In 2008, Vadello et al. Proposed 3 assumptions about the male gender role that distinguishes it from the female gender role. First, manhood is widely viewed as an elusive achieved status or one that must be earned, in contrast to womanhood, which is ascribed or an assigned status. Second, once achieved, manhood is tenuous and impermanent. Men can lose manhood status by enacting stereotypically feminine or by failing to demonstrate adequate levels of masculinity. And finally, 3, manhood status is conferred primarily by others and thus requires regular public demonstrations of proof. So you can have a little dicky, but if you want to be a man, a 100% mammalian, you're going to have to do some shit to prove it. And we're all going to have to see it. So the specific traits that make someone masculine can vary from culture to culture or across time periods, but the precariousness of manhood itself is ubiquitous and perhaps universal. And it is this manhood we chase through the act of cooking someone in front of an intimate crowd. Because the thing about roasting is, let's be real, it's bullying. Put down the forks. Put down the forks. Be civil. It's playful bullying. Entertaining jesting. Clever amateur stand-up. But it is bullying nonetheless. And, well, why do we do this? Is it to let off steam the way Dollar described? Is it the rejection of the mother, like Abram said? Or is it more of a holdover from, African traditions? Maybe it's just that no one tells us to stop and we just enjoy the spectacle of it all, the thrill of having everyone laugh at your joke. But I think perhaps the better question isn't why we do it, but is there a way we can do it better?
I don't think we need to abolish roasting, but I do think there needs to be consent there and true familiarity. Otherwise, like, you're just saying stuff like, oh, you have a gap in your teeth. I know. I think it's cute. I'm kind of obsessed, actually. Like, let's get to something that's real. Like, tell me about my avoidant attachment style, my fear of commitment. Like, let's do something real. So I think there has to be consent and familiarity, and maybe even, like, it has to be a person that you love, because otherwise we can fall into that trap of just, like, commenting on things that are already negative or oppressive in our society.
I feel like once you fall into like an ism, like you're going with colorism, or you're being fatphobic, or you're being like, you're using structural, like things that involve structural systemic like issues, it's not funny anymore. Because when you're done with that session, that person who's dark skinned or fat or disabled, that those things that you made fun of them for, they are actually going to be dealing with like consequences for that in the real world. And I don't like replicating that in my friendships.
I think roasting has its place, and it's normally between folks that have some agreement on the rules of engagement, and it's obviously mutual. When it's not, I think that's when we get into the territory of it being harmful.
Roasting can take a toll when, one, it's the only thing you hear from the people you interact with. Two, you don't have boundaries set with parties, or your boundaries aren't being respected. Three, it isn't being offset by positive intimacy, like hearing what people do like about you. Nice shoes. Ooh, I see you with the fresh cut. I subscribe to your YouTube channel. The roast is based around the presumption of intimacy or solidarity. I keep saying that word. We play fight because we're already in the trenches together, but the trenches aren't everything. The world may be cold, but you deserve warmth and joy and safety nonetheless. And you gotta let niggas know that. So I don't want this essay to come off as like, wah, stop making jokes about me, I'm sensitive. Because I'm not saying that. I promise I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is make jokes, not easy insults. And most importantly, lead with love. Roasting only hurts when you're getting burnt all over, you know? Like I said before, it wasn't necessarily the comments from my friends that bothered me. It was the fact that I didn't have opposing evidence that they didn't mean the things that they were saying. And that doesn't mean I want you to be like measuring out and leveling your compliments to insults. I mean, you should be throwing hella compliments at regular intervals so the roast gets washed in the aggregate. And that's critical roast theory. So cook with care, roast with respect, joan like you grown. Just hug the homies, man. Because sometimes they need it more than you think. Okay, that's what's been on my color mind. Tell me what's on yours. And as always, be kind. See you guys.